So you're here to compare Python and Java. Let's see which is easier to understand as far as readability, and then what is easier to type, meaning shorter. So first off, let's go over the simple print hello world to the standard output. And here I would say that Python definitely wins. You just have a simple print string enclosed with parentheses, and then if you need to run it from a module instead of the interactive prompt, you have def main and then another print hello and then this line of code. Looking at Java, it seems as if to do any of it, you have to create a class, and then you're creating a function, and then you have system.out.println. Now at least this is simpler and easier to understand than C++, but as far as typing, Python wins. And let's not even go dive into the rest of these, because it's just creating an enclosing class again, and then a function, and then running that function. Onwards to variables. Again, Python is dynamically typed, so of course there's going to be a lot less typing. So easier to type, shorter to type. But then again, is it easier to understand? Perhaps. But then again, statically typed means you at least know what the variable is always going to be, so you can't get lost and it doesn't change. But again, a lot more typing, as you can see. Comparing this to just variable name equals and whatever you assign to it, it becomes, to then having to think everything out and then plan it ahead. I would say definitely Python wins as far as ease of use, and readability, though, not necessarily, because in a large program you could overwrite these names and you'd have to check types and see what it is after you've mutated it. Here everything stays the same, but then again I would say this is more useful. Python, easier to type, easier to understand. Let's go on to standard input. Again, you have the ease of just using the input built-in command here, string prompt, and assigning it directly to a variable. That's pretty clutch. And then printing out values just separated by commas, and it prints them all out. Let's see what Java has to hold. So again, you seem to always have to import something in these statically typed languages in order to utilize full functionality of what is built in Python. And as you can see here, that's a lot more typing. Input, however, still requires two different lines of code and a separate element in order to print something out as a prompt, and then assigning the scanner, assigning whatever the input is. That's definitely more code, and just imagine having to do a large list of these. That's quite a lot of code difference. But you can definitely understand what it is. System out print. But why couldn't it just be print? Who knows? Onwards to conditional statements. Again, let's touch upon the fact that I haven't touched upon before, is that you need to encapsulate or enclose everything within these curly braces. And then you have to end each line again with a semicolon. That's a lot of typing, a lot of additional mess, and lack of clarity when you get a bit complex. Python, kind of simple, straightforward. If, elif. This kind of matches the C++ syntax. But it does have the switch, which is definitely clutch if you have a lot of different outputs and cases to run through. Onwards to loops. Again, the Python range is very convenient in that you can just input the length of your array or your data structure and iterate through it by index. Simple for loop. Let's see how you can do it in Java. This seems to be the norm as far as for statically typed languages like Java and C++, in that you have the variable you have to assign that is going to be incrementing, the limit or condition, and then the direction of its increases. A lot more to type, can be a bit cumbersome to understand until you get used to it. Again, you have to declare all the types, so you will constantly see that when you're looping through something, you at least can get direct access to that, but you have to declare all of the data types, which is a bit more lengthy. And again, to do something as simple as a for loop over the length of a list, that's a lot more typing than simply using the range. Again, Python wins in this regard. So functions and methods. Definitely easy to understand. You just do a def keyword, name of your function, argument, and then you have a return statement. Easy to understand, easy to use, and then you also have the ability to accept multiple different argument types within the same function definition, which is definitely clutch. Let's see if it is like C++, Java, and that you have to declare or create different same name functions in order to accomplish multiple argument type inputs. Yep, it seems that you have to do that. So you have greet with title, multiple different creations here of the functions, and they have to declare the different amount of variables and then their types. So that's not as great as the simplicity that is Python. Greet with title, and bada bing, you're done. Again, all the static typing requirements, public, static, void, what's returning, you have to declare all of this up front, where you do not have to declare all of that up front, but you can use type hinting to accomplish a similar amount of increased usability and understanding of what the arguments are meant to be. But I would say Python wins in this regard as well. Now going to arrays and lists, you have simple assignment with these square brackets to create a Python list, their version of the array. And you can make it dynamic, and it can house multiple different heterogeneous data types, as you can see here. Let's see if you can accomplish the same feat here in Java. It appears that for statically typed languages, creating an array, it's not possible to have multiple different data types within the same array, which definitely is a hindrance depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Python makes it much easier. Here, you have to declare the array, and usually you have to declare the size. Again, Python wins in this regard. And just note the large amount of typing required for simple things. Very simple, short, easy to understand. Lastly, going over classes, where at least in Python you'll have to see more of the class keyword usage. But again, you don't have to declare what is being returned in all of these constructors and function or method definitions here. You do not have to declare what is being returned. You don't have to declare the variables and the variable types being utilized. Let's see what Java entails. So again, you have the public class. You have the data types that are going to be utilized throughout. You have to declare their types and up front for them to be used within the constructor. But then again, here you have the methods being fairly straightforward, except for the, of course, public and void usage. That's a lot more typing, but again, we're not comparing apples to apples, of course. This language allows you to have much greater control of memory usage versus Python. But a lot of the same features are available as far as inheritance. But I would say, again, Python wins in this regard. Much simpler, easy to understand, easier to read, easier to type. Lastly, we'll go over exception handling with the try except. Again, very simple, easy, straightforward. You know what you're trying to do here. Let's see what Java entails. So you have to create a class for exception handling, and then all of these nasty curly braces to encapsulate what you're trying to do, enclose them within curly braces, and then the end of line characters. Just a lot more to type, especially if you're trying to print things out to standard output. That's a lot more typing, a lot more clutter than, say, just this line of code or this block. So that was the quick comparison. I always love Python. Definitely not the best as far as memory usage, far from it in fact, but as far as ease of understanding and readability, as well as ease of typing, Python wins again. Thanks for joining.